This is Lemme Explain 101. Plain answers, no jargon. Today, we're diving into one of the spiciest topics of the 20th and 21st centuries, communist countries. Now, before you panic, no, this isn't going to be a lecture from your high school history teacher who wore tweed jackets and smelled like chalk dust. This is Communism 101, Rex style. Think of me as your mechanical tour guide, carefully avoiding ideological minefields while still giving you the big picture. So let's ask, how do self-proclaimed communist countries actually operate, economically and socially? What is a communist country anyway? First, a clarification. Technically, according to Karl Marx, true communism is a stateless, classless society where everyone shares resources equally and money doesn't exist. Spoiler, no country has ever gotten there. What we actually see are states that call themselves communist, but are more like socialist one-party systems. They usually mix Marxist ideas with their own flavors of politics and economics. Examples today: China, Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, and North Korea. The Soviet Union used to be the big one, but it collapsed in 1991, long before TikTok could have made Cold War dance challenges go viral. Economic operations. How does the money flow? 1. State ownership of resources. In theory, key industries, energy, transport, natural resources, belong to the state. The government decides how much is produced, where it goes, and at what price. Instead of corporations chasing profit, the idea is to distribute fairly. Sounds tidy, right? Well, in practice, it often leads to inefficiency. Factories sometimes produce too much of what nobody wants. Hello, warehouses of unsellable shoes, or too little of what everyone needs, like bread. 2. Planned versus market economies. Classic communist systems, like the old Soviet Union, ran on central planning. Bureaucrats in Moscow decided how many tractors Ukraine needed or how many socks Siberia should make. Spoiler, the math often didn't add up. Modern versions, like China and Vietnam, have blended market elements into the mix. China calls this socialism with Chinese characteristics. Translation: the government still controls the big stuff, but you can open a dumpling shop or a tech startup and make a fortune. That's why China has both billionaires and a communist party ruling the state. 3. Collectivization versus private ownership. In the early days, communist countries tried collectivizing farms, forcing peasants to farm together for the state. It often went badly. In China, it led to famine in the 1950s. Nowadays, most allow small-scale private farming, but land is still technically state-owned. So economically, communist countries range from rigidly state-controlled, North Korea, to hybrids with capitalist spice, China, Vietnam. Social structures. How do people live? 1. One-party rule. All self-proclaimed communist countries today are single-party states. That means the Communist Party is the only legal ruling party, and it tightly controls politics, media, and sometimes even daily life. Elections may exist, but they don't involve multiple parties competing for power like in democracies. 2. Emphasis on equality. At least in theory. The pitch is that communism promotes equality. Workers and peasants are the heroes, and the gap between rich and poor is kept under control. In reality, party elites often enjoy privileges the average citizen does not. If you've ever wondered who gets first dibs on luxury goods in Havana or Beijing, it's usually not the factory worker. 3. Social services. 1 strength. Communist countries often prioritize universal education, healthcare, and housing. Cuba, for example, has one of the highest literacy rates in the world and strong healthcare despite being a small island under embargo. 4. Collective culture. Individualism takes a back seat. The story is usually about the collective, the people, the party, the nation. In North Korea, it's turned up to 11, with extreme control over culture, art, and even hairstyles. Yes, even your haircut might be political. Famous contradictions and realities. Here's the kicker. Most of these countries don't operate purely on communist economics. China has billionaires, Vietnam thrives on exports, and Cuba lets people run small businesses. North Korea, meanwhile, has black markets that technically break the rules but keep people alive. So while the governments fly the red flag, the systems are usually a patchwork of planned economy, state control, and market flexibility. Good question, human. Communist countries often argue they provide stability, sovereignty, and protection from Western capitalism. Supporters point to fewer extreme gaps between rich and poor, free education, and healthcare. Critics highlight lack of freedom, inefficiency, and corruption. It's a trade-off, more control, less chaos, but also less liberty. So, to answer our big question, how do self-proclaimed communist countries operate? Economically, they lean heavily on state ownership and planning but increasingly borrow from capitalism when convenient. Socially, they promise equality and collective good, but power remains concentrated in the ruling party. In practice, it's a messy blend. Not quite Marx's dream, not quite capitalism, but a hybrid that keeps evolving. And as your friendly robot narrator, I'll say this. Humans are very creative when it comes to bending ideologies into whatever works for survival. After all, if even a communist state can have billionaires, then maybe Karl Marx is spinning in his grave. Or maybe he's just shaking his head, muttering, "That's not what I wrote." So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, hit subscribe, and hit us up in the comments section with your ideas of what we should explain in the next episode. This is Rex, signing off. Remember, whether it's communism, capitalism, or just trying to split the bill at dinner, humans will always find a way to argue about money.